Good afternoon, folks. Today we have with us a very special guest, Nina Simmonds. Nina unlocks the full potential in leaders so that they can transform their organizations and create positive and social impact. With over 15 years of experience as an executive coach, she works with leaders as a strategist and thought partner to navigate the messy spaces of team development and organizational change. She brings a deep understanding of interpersonal dynamics, a lifelong desire to grow, and a deep respect for the art and science of leadership. She engages in conversations to co-create learning and assist leaders in transforming themselves, their teams, and their relationships. She has a successful track record in developing leaders and facilitating positive change. She does this through one-on-one conversation, peer groups, and her podcast titled Let's Get Real. Check it out, folks. She serves on the faculty of the Coactive Training Institute and formerly with CRR Global, where she has delivered programs in every region of the world, including London, Tokyo, Johannesburg, New York, and Los Angeles. This gives her firsthand experience of cultural differences and how to bring experiential learning to diverse groups. That's a mouthful, Nina. Welcome.
It sure is. Yeah. That's what happens when you're over 50 and you've been doing the work for a while.
Yeah. So, you talk about doing the work, and I read off a lot of the things that you do, both personally and professionally. What do you get out of doing this work?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I get tons. I have been self-employed since I was 30, and so autonomy has always been a high value. So I think the ability to kind of create my day and to say yes to clients that I want to work with is one of the things I'm getting now. I also get the joy of seeing people grow, but even more importantly, just being a support and being an empathetic ear. I think a lot of times in the world we're in today, what I can do best is just provide a space for people to explore what's going on in their world in a kind of a supportive place.
That sounds like a space and support that everybody on the face of this globe could utilize. So I definitely applaud you for that. So what I would ask then is that something that you have personally always had in your life?
That's a good question. I thought you might go deep right away. That's what I would expect from you, Eldra. I think I was attracted to coaching because I was looking for something more. And so, I grew up with parents who, struggled just like a lot of people. They were young and didn't always have stable work. And so my childhood wasn't the most stable as it could have been. But as I look back on it, I think about all of the things that they did do for me that in the time I wasn't always aware of. I just felt the struggle and the stress more than anything else. And so I was kind of craving stability as I went into my 20s. And that started out by being financially successful. But that quickly morphed to, what are the other ways that we can create not only a fulfilling life, but maybe always seeking kind of greater safety, greater ability to navigate my own emotions. And so there was always this piece that was also about my growth and growing beyond the limitations or growing beyond society's expectations of what I was supposed to do. I think that became an early theme for me in my work and in my life. And I feel very grateful that I've had the privilege, I had, the opportunity to go to college. And back when I went to college, there was a lot more grant money available. It was a lot less expensive than it is now. So even though my parents couldn't pay for me to go to college, I was able to do that easily.
Yeah. I heard you in there speak a little bit about growing out of the expectations that society has for you. What were some of those expectations that you saw that society had for you?
Well, probably the first one was, having this successful career going in college publishing. And I remember the company I was working for was getting bought out by another big company. There was a lot of mergers happening in publishing. We went from like 25 publishing houses to like 8 within a 5-year span. And I remember just telling my boss that I wanted to take one of these what they call golden parachutes, or these buyouts. I just wanted to go to graduate school, do something new. And he was very shocked, and he tried to talk me out of it. He saw me as a rising talent, and I didn't see. I think part of the challenge is this is where my politics come in. I didn't There weren't any women running the organization or even at the executive level, and I saw my friends who were my age and a little bit older leaving to go have a family because they didn't see how they could make it all work. And so for me, it was like, well, if I want to carve out time for family and time for other things, I think I'll be better off being self-employed doing that than staying inside the corporate model. And so at the time, that's what I chose to do. And I was lucky enough that I had plenty of support to do that. But I also felt there was a courageous act in saying, yeah, I could stay here, and I'm sure I would continue to move up. But my heart really wasn't in the work enough to want to do that.
Hmm. Hmm. And I heard a couple of key words in there. I heard corporate and I heard women.
Yes.
And another word is leadership.
Yes.
So could you speak a little bit about your experience as a woman in the corporate world around leadership and being a leader and what that is like?
Well, in my niche, it's wonderful. Like being a coach and supporting leaders is amazing. I think that when I think about my work, it's always been at the intersection of like individual achievement, individual growth, and what's going on in the system that we're working in. How does the system support us as individuals? How does the system create what it wants to create? So I think of corporations as one of the most influential systems we have in the United States. You see that over and over again, even in the last 4 years with what's been going on here, that organizations have a tremendous amount of capacity, not only because of all the people that go to work every day and work inside organizations, but because of the influence they can have in the larger world as corporate citizens. So I guess that's a very big answer to a question about leadership. But what I saw was that leaders had the biggest impact on how that company was run, what kind of culture was created, who even got ahead. And so who got rewarded, because getting ahead is only one part of it, right? Like, do you enjoy your work, and do you feel like you're making a difference? I mean, that's the thing that really makes leadership and makes going to work every day important for most of us.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I hear that. And so I guess what I would follow up with is more specifically, what is it like to be a woman in that arena? In
That's
a
a good
male
question.
dominated culture, what is it like to be a woman in the realms of leadership, in corporate realms, in the corporate world, and being a woman, a strong woman, and dealing with male dominated culture?
It's a good question. Well, I have to say that because I've been on the outside for the last 20 years, I've benefited from it as much as I've been a change agent in it, right? Because I have coached a lot of executives. And honestly, Eldra, one of the reasons why I am actually doing less executive coaching than I did even 2 years ago is I did reach this point where I didn't feel like I was reaching enough of the people I wanted to be coaching, that there weren't enough women in positions of authority. And there are plenty of women who are women leaders. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of my executive clients in tech, especially, they were men, because that's they're just the odds of you coaching men over women were pretty great in the executive space. So, and then there was also the piece about the culture in the organization. So I might be working with a really talented woman, and she's trying to there's where it gets really complicated and also simple. Like, I really actually believe that masculine and feminine energy live in all of us,
Hmm.
and that one of the downsides of corporate culture, the way it has been dominated by men, is it's taken on a more masculine tone, a more masculine energy, so much so that women who rise up often are doing it in a way that is only honoring their masculine, if you know what I mean. Or men
Yes.
are in positions of authority uh, because that part of them is so natural to them, and they can bring a little bit of the feminine into that, uh, but not a lot, right? Because it's not really valued. So you see, and there are exceptions to this. Like I think of Satya Nadella at Microsoft. I think he has a balanced approach to leadership. I think he does bring in the feminine because he talks about empathy. He talks about um, being a social partner in the world. You know, he wants to. You know, he was doing inclusion before it was cool, right? So I think that there are leaders who model this combination of masculine and feminine, but there are times when I feel like, and I feel like that's what my work is about in essence. You know, bringing emotional intelligence to leaders is partially about helping them honor all of who they are, both their masculine and feminine parts.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very important as well. And so what, as a woman, in your experience coaching men,
Yes.
what is that dynamic like?
Well, most of the time it's quite, I would call it quite symbiotic. Uh, I think there are times when men choose female coaches because they want that other part, that sounding partner that's not, that they don't have to be so manly with, or they can just be themselves. I think, and I think coaching, I love coaching people in some ways, right? I love coaching intelligent people. And I do find the issues are different between men and women, and men and women leaders. And I think that a lot of times when I'm working with women, I'm working to increase their self belief because they're already doing a good job. And it's more about how do I make sure that they really stand in their goodness and in their authority and what they can bring. And sometimes with men, I'm not exactly doing the opposite, but men tend to cope by pretending more. And so for that, in those cases, it's like, it's not that they don't come across confident, but they do have inner demons, inner worries, inner things that they're not sharing. And so giving them a space to do that is different. So it's not as much working on confidence as it is on working on, like, what do I need to learn about myself to be the best possible leader for the people in my organization or on my team, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Very different, very different, similar but different. And I like, how you referenced working with people and a preference to just working with people, and hopefully one day we can get away from the distinctions. I don't know
Yeah,
if we'll do it in my lifetime, but I definitely would like to see it.
I hear you.
So in thinking about coaching, and this is something, I have conversations with people often, and I hear people talking about going to therapists and going to coaching. So point blank, some people listening to this might, ask, what the hell qualifies you to be able to coach another person?
Mm, that's a good question. Well, I'm anything if not qualified in terms of the number of letters behind my name. So I do believe in continuing education. I do believe in the credentialing process. You know, I believe the International Coach Federation, which is the governing body for the coaching schools, is an important organization to what we do. We are what we call a self-governing profession, which is why you end up seeing a lot of people who can put coach in their title. We're not like a social worker or a therapist where you actually it's getting more important to have our letters behind us, but the industry itself and our customer is still, it's a pretty new business still, right? And we're not regulated by the government yet. So when I think about what qualifies me, in addition to doing my training, like actually being a trained coach, and I'm trained through the Coaches Training Institute and also CRR Global, which you mentioned in my bio, both excellent schools for different reasons, different modalities. But in addition to that, I'm doing my own work, and so I've interviewed therapists to do my therapy work. I've interviewed coaches, and I can tell within 15 minutes whether their mindset is one that I can learn from or whether they're on a different journey than I'm on. And that is largely, I think, because of their own work, the work that they may or may not be doing on themselves. And so I'm listening for that when I'm the client, and that's what I would tell other people who are hiring a coach to be listening for. Like, we call it synergy or fit, but I think for me that's a big piece of it. Like, am I hearing someone who has wisdom, that is open-minded, doesn't come across as judging? Those are like my bare minimum criteria. But then also, what else are they talking about that is interesting or would help me grow? That's the other piece that I'm listening for.
Yeah, yeah. What resonates with me is the piece where you spoke about the individual doing their own work and you doing your own work. We tell people that all the time, here at Inside Circle. They're like, hey, how can I become a facilitator? How can I do with you? Well, it starts with you doing your own work.
Yes.
Everybody, as far as I'm concerned, is a facilitator. It's just a matter of doing your own work, being willing to do your own work. So what is your major piece of work that continues to come up for you if you have one?
Well, it evolves for sure. And a lot of it is around being um, more aware, more empathetic, more interpersonally connected. And so in the last year, what that has meant has been more work around anti-racism because, I'm a feminism since my 20s. So I've always been kind of socially and politically aware, but it was kind of even for the last 2 or 3 years, I was aware of wanting to do more around social equity and justice and diversity. I didn't like the fact that I was working in very white places, that how white everything was around me, like white executives, white coaches, and so I was already thinking about that work, but I hadn't really found a way to really latch into it. And this is where I think the magic of systems plays in, like, until first of all, Trump got elected, and that woke a lot of people up who have more progressive values. But then even the thing that finally hit white folks around George Floyd and all the other people who interact with our criminal justice system and end up, it's a deadly interaction versus it doesn't even feel like justice, right? It's the opposite of justice. So that whole thing last year had me just really dive deep into how I'd been centering whiteness in my own life and in my own work, and how blind I was to some of the privileges that I had. And so that's what led to me even launching the podcast. So my work right now is becoming more decentering my own white experience and understanding racism in the United States in a way that I've never understood it before.
And what are you learning about both racism and yourself?
Oh my goodness. It's like, well, so much, so much. I don't even know where to start. I think what I'm excited about is I'm learning so much about how much opportunity there is for me to be a better person, for me to contribute in a more significant way. And I don't mean that from a savior place. I mean it more from a partnering place and a learning place. Like, I get to learn by being in community with people who have different experiences than I do. Like, you and I wouldn't have crossed paths with you, or I wouldn't have been curious about you. I might have been intimidated or just thought you were like, you have a different world that you live in. So I wouldn't have been able to broach that before doing this work. So it's made me more courageous about reaching out to people who are different from me. And it's because I did a year of inner work and work with a lot of other white folks, I'm more aware of my own biases coming into the work. So I'm not looking to you or other people of color to teach me about racism. I am interested in learning about your experience, but I'm not expecting you, which I think was one of the mistakes we've made in the past, is we expected people of color to do the work for us, which is just a perpetuation of the very systems we're trying to break down, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's something that a lot of people don't get, and I have conversations like that in some spaces about what that looks like. And I heard something you said that kind of piqued my interest. You know, you spent a year doing your own work and doing it with other white folks. Can we get a glimpse behind the curtain into what that looks like?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things that I did last year, and it's funny because one of the reasons we don't talk, we as in the white people who are in these groups don't talk about it, is because it sounds performative, and when we do, and so that's why we don't. I didn't mean to be vague about it, but I got there was a woman who was ahead of me on the curve who'd been doing the work for the last 5 years and had even reoriented her work towards doing more of this kind of thing, and she connected me with a group that was starting last June that was going through the book Me and White Supremacy together. And we were doing, I think that book originally was 28 Days of Understanding White Supremacy. It was an Instagram program. But the woman wrote a book, and we did it over 28 weeks instead. And so I think that slowing down of the process and going deep on all these different forms of white supremacy was really powerful. And we met once a week for 90 minutes on Zoom, and we would each share, here's how I've been centering myself in my life, or here's how I've thought I was superior. Like, we would really just be really honest about and what I got clearer on was the harm that I and other white liberals do in this community, rather than just pointing fingers at people who live in the South or people who are conservative or whatever. Like, I had to look at where my experience is and where I've done harm. And then the circle itself was a circle. We would all speak. No one spoke to you directly. You just shared. And then when you were done, you went to the next person, and we lit a candle at the beginning. So very similar to the circles that you and I are both familiar with. Um, but no one was making us feel better or
Hmm.
worse about our sharing. We just shared. And it was in that process of being witnessed and also doing the inner work before the call that was like the first step. And so, and I did a ton of reading too, because I use my brain probably more than my heart. It's like my bias is towards intellectual learning. And so I read a ton last year, and I was in different other groups talking about racism and getting support in those other ways. But that group was probably the main shifter, because it included the emotional parts of, the shame that we were experiencing in surfacing some of this stuff, and also just being encouraged to keep going every week.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for that. And now what I'm going to ask you to do is get out of your head.
Great, great.
I'm going to ask you to take a moment and get out of your head and go into your heart.
Hmm.
And as comfortable as you are, willing to share, what was the most revelatory piece for you about yourself going through that 28-week process?
Hmm. Wow. Well, um, I, it's hard to say because there's so many small micro things, but um, probably what the author calls my white exceptionalism, like thinking somehow that I'm better than a lot of other folks because I care more, or I'm doing things, or so there's a way that we just all have to pay attention to. And I kind of sink into my heart, I think it was very easy for me to see the oppression that women experience, because I am a woman, um, to actually come to terms with how I support the white supremacy in my everyday interactions, and how there were just kept being options. Like, we had a woman of color run for city council in my city, and I I just noticed how the structural stuff was getting in the way of us really supporting her. And even when I would try to reach out, was I doing it from a place of superiority, like, that she needed my help, versus this is a great candidate. We would be lucky to have her in this role. So just paying more attention to my own motives, what was in my heart when I was quote unquote helping or doing my activism.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah, my pleasure. It's good for me to be more always good to be connected to my heart.
Yeah. So that to me sounds like not just revelation, but it sounds like an opportunity for transformation.
Hmm.
And if you can speak to, because it sounds like you've had a lot of transformational moments and opportunities in your life, and you continue to, if you can identify the greatest transformation in your life, what would that have been?
Wow, good question. Um, hmm. It may have been honestly going through my divorce. I'd like to say it was, part of my coach training, but that definitely, doing the leadership program at CTI was a big lift for me. Like it really empowered me to be more confident in my own self and in what I wanted to create and be more loving. So that was a huge thing for me. But the choice to get a divorce and leave a marriage that, from all external things, looked like it was working, looked like it was, you know, uh, I was married to a kind and successful man, and deciding to leave that relationship it was transformational because I had to like really step into, it's okay if people don't like me. It's okay if people don't understand this. It's okay if not that it's okay that I'm going to choose to cause my children pain in order to model a bigger life and in order to model something that, and at the time that's not what I was thinking. I was just worried, but there was an intuitive underneath all of that wisdom that allowed me to navigate that process.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like there are a lot of moving parts in something like that.
Yes.
And I ask because, people who may be listening here, we're trying to provide a platform for people to gain access to what transformation looks like.
Yes.
And, they may think that it's something that they can't do themselves. And the more that we can give them, a peek behind the curtain into what it looks like, hopefully they can find it for themselves. And so I would imagine there was a lot of fear
Yes.
involved in stepping into that transformation. Can you speak a little bit to that?
There was a ton of fear, like an amazing amount. Like I was in more fear than I'd experienced since I got out of high school. And so that was the interesting thing, was it triggered a lot of old stuff. Um, and, and I think it was also a challenging situation because I was choosing it. It wasn't like it happened to me. I initiated it. And so, you can get really negative. There's a lot of self-doubt that can come into some kind of situation like that. But I think the things that I remember most about that time are this simultaneously trusting of myself, even through all that pain. And I did become a regular meditator during that time. And I was getting support during that time, support from friends, support from a coach. I don't think I was in therapy at that time, but I did therapy shortly after my divorce. So getting help, there's nothing, in fact, it's not only there's nothing wrong with getting help, it's like necessary to get help when you're going to make a big change in your life. So that was a piece of it. But then also there's a piece about, just knowing what you're wanting, what you're moving towards, and trusting that's going to be worth any kind of temporary discomfort, or you've got, and again, from a leadership place, it's like the vision piece, right? And at the time, my vision was embodied more than it was in my mind. Like I couldn't have articulated my vision because I was in so much pain, but I had an embodied sense that on the other side of this was going to be a life that was much closer to the life that I was meant to be living.
Yeah. And I hear you talk about, trusting and knowing. How does one get to that place of knowing so that they can trust if they've never done it before. And they
Yeah.
have these fears, and there's this opportunity for this transformation, but I don't have the experience to do that. How do I get to where I can trust a knowing? Or how do I know that I know this is the knowing?
Yes, yes. Well, I think somatic work is super important, and it's a very fancy word for trusting the wisdom of your body. And so I think that looks different for different people, but if you're going to be in a circle with folks, be in a circle that isn't just head, that is including heart and and the physical aspects of who we are. You'll have to ask me your question again because I just want to make sure I'm getting it right.
How do you know, number one, what the knowing is, and
Hmm.
what gets you to a place to trust that knowing,
Hmm. No, I think it's
in
also tiny
spite
steps.
of the fear, with the fear being present?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think it's tiny steps, right? Like and I loved what you said when you came onto my podcast about giving advice is less useful than sharing experiences or inviting people into things. And I think for me, the invitation um, is that conversation with self. So if you're not working with someone, are you writing to yourself each day? Um, like if you're having a conversation with yourself, and I mean this in the positive, like your higher self, not the saboteur that tells you, all the things you should be doing, then your voice will emerge. Like if you're listening enough, that voice will emerge. Like that voice emerged for me when I left that career that was successful to launch something new. That voice told me to get out of nonprofit work when I did because it wasn't walking the talk of what what it said it was supposed to be doing. So it's like the micro decisions, um, and I think for every person it's different. For me, it's a boundary setting because of who I am, but for others it might be a saying yes to things. It might be saying yes to graduate school or saying yes to a relationship and then allowing that to unfold, right? That's transformation is as much as we talk in coaching about transformation being this big thing, it is also daily things, the daily acts we take for ourselves.
Sounds like practice.
Yes, it is. Practice does create the what do you call it? It's like the scaffolding. Practice creates the scaffolding for the life we want.
Yeah, yeah. So, is there anything in particular that you're practicing these days?
Well, I'm writing every day. I was resisting meditation, and so a friend of mine who was giving me a mentoring session just suggested I write instead. So I'm doing that for 10 minutes a day, and that's been very helpful in slowing my mind down because, as you can see, I've got a lot going on mentally these days. Um, and exercise is definitely a regular thing for me, whether it's a walking or something, strength training, something else, but anything that has me connected to, it's not only is it good for our health, but it's another form of embodied work, that I really think is important. Um, those are the main ones. And my work is kind of practice. I think it's so amazing that I get to have learning conversations for a living. So I'm practicing being a better interviewer for my own podcast. And I'm practicing, always practicing. I think in my coaching right now, what I'm really working on is accountability. It's a thing that I've always been a little squishy on. I've always been better at supporting than holding people accountable. And I've been doing some interesting thinking and listening about accountability. And so I'm learning, and so I'm practicing more in my coaching, like asking people about things that they've committed to and digging deeper when they have decided not to do something that they said they wanted. So that's a place where I'm trying to grow.
Yeah, yeah. I'm hearing a lot of wisdom. I'm not just hearing it, I'm feeling a lot of wisdom coming from you,
Hmm.
and a lot of experience. And so with that, I'm going to ask you again to get out of your head and into your heart, and maybe connect your heart to your mind's eye and envision 6-year-old Nina.
Hmm.
And you let me know when you can see her.
Oh yeah, she's right here.
She's right there. So if given this opportunity now, having an opportunity to talk to her, what would the invitation be to her?
Hmm. Well, the invitation probably that she would give to me, I'm going to reverse it,
Okay.
would be to play more. That's my theme for 2021 is play. Um, and then I think my invitation to her would be to trust more.
Play more and trust more. She's inviting you to play more, and you would invite her to trust more. So then I'll ask you, do you trust more?
I do, and there's always room for more trust, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my desire to make the world better for more people is driven partially from my distrust, for sure.
Yeah.
So there's a paradox in trusting that we're all good and that things will unfold in a positive direction, that sometimes, is hard to grab a hold of in this world that we're living in right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So then her invitation to you was to play more. What keeps you from playing more?
Um, just this kind of desire to the striver in me, the one who wants things. It's interesting how my striver has really served me in moving me from focusing on my own material success to, I hope, I think there's always room for more ability to help others to be contributing to what we want to have in the world, what we want to create. um but trust and play can make, there's no reason why that can't be playful, like there, and actually when it's playful it actually is easier for everybody. I think what people resist is when we're preaching and when we're forcing and when we're trying to fix everything, right? And so play is such a great metaphor for the mindset of what and I have this wonderful, wonderful woman named Adrienne Marie Brown who um, who wrote a book called Pleasure Activism, and I think she's one of my teachers right now. Just how do we bring more play and pleasure to this movement that we're all in?
Yeah. Yeah. Play and pleasure. I'm working on playing more myself in 2021.
Are
So I,
you?
I can
Good.
definitely understand where you're coming from there. What
I'll
what
be your
what are
accountability
three?
partner, Eldra.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I need accountability partners all over the place, especially when it comes to play and having more fun.
Yes, yes. Let's be serious and set up some goals for having more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. What if you can identify three things about yourself that you're proud of, what are those three things?
Hmm. Well, that's a good question. That makes me a little my heart do something. Well, I think my compassion. I would give myself some appreciation for that. I definitely am a compassionate human, and compassion is such a beautiful place to live in. When I slow down and am there. Um, I think my drive, for sure. I can make my drive wrong because I have just a tremendous amount of energy, and I can wear myself out. But in general, I think my drive um, to do things, to whether it's keeping our house clean or running my business or doing this podcast. So drive is cool, and just a desire to keep learning. I think that I appreciate that because it keeps my life interesting.
Yeah. Is there anything that we did not touch on today that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's been a great conversation in the sense that you've covered some wide terrain, which I'm happy about. I thought about what we might talk about today, but I'm glad we didn't just talk about the corporate work, which I love. It's very fulfilling for me, and I just love the ability that I have, like I said, to to do different things and have them all make sense somehow
Yeah,
together.
yeah,
I just appreciate you and what you're up to, and that you're having these conversations. I really do feel like conversation and connecting to other people is where the greatest learning happens. And so that's why I do my podcast as a conversation. That's why I was thrilled when you invited me to come here. Is I think I think we can learn so much more by what's emerging in a conversation than by me preparing some remarks for you and presenting something.
yeah. Agreed. The connections and people having those spaces for genuine, open, and authentic conversation is in my judgment kind of rare these days.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that I can get distracted with
Mm.
and utilize as tools to, keep me distant from people. But what I've learned, myself, is that the more that I'm open to connecting with other people, those barriers start to fall down, those walls start to fall down, those prisons that I build up around myself to keep other people out start to get torn down. So I definitely appreciate the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you and being asked. So we'll to be continued, hopefully.
Yes, ma'am. So where can our listeners find you, learn more about you, any projects that you have going on?
Well, my favorite endeavor right now is this podcast, Let's Get Real, and they can find that on wherever they like to listen, either through the name or even just my name, Nina Simons with a D. Um, my website is ninasimondscoaching.com if they're curious about peer groups that are coming up. And I'm also online everywhere that anyone likes to hang out. So Instagram, and Instagram is probably my favorite place right now. I just like the visual aspect of it, and the fact that it's simpler. It's an easier place to hang out. So
Okay, so people look her up, Nina Simons. Pleasure to have you with us here today.
thanks for having me, Eldra.